so I'd like to welcome Jeff to the stage. Sorry, I got to grab Meryl's stuff real quick.
Okay. Thank you. My sound on? Good. Want to thank our two previous presenters. Sometimes you do these conferences and it's sort of bopping all over the place, and I think there's tremendous alignment around the ideas that we're going to talk about for at least the next 15, 20 minutes. The piece that's interesting, I'm sure many of you sit in the audience and you look at Coca-Cola's resources, or you look at the scope of a 9-part management system and find that a bit overwhelming, which it could be, although I think they are still painting the right kind of vision for where we need to go. And so what I'll hopefully be able to share today is something that both attacks some fundamental ideas about how hard it is to change to these kinds of systems, but as well as perhaps provide some practical advice on things to think about. LRW is a 42-year-old market research consultancy. We're based out of Los Angeles. We've grown up with this industry, and so maybe we're in a unique spot because we're so busy trying to transform ourselves into the new marketing research. Hopefully some of our lessons and some of our ideas can inspire you, because that's why I come to this conference. There can't be a better audience of leaders and change agents in this industry, and I so profoundly believe we have to make changes if we're going to be the most relevant partners for our businesses and for this industry to have its place, because there is so much data aflood in this world, and we are the stewards of it, but we have to adapt and change. And so today is really, I'm going to give some really straight talk about, and I'm going to lay bare a few things that I think are kind of not pretty, but I'm hoping by talking directly and honestly about it, it can inspire us all to what we need to do in our piece of the world to make that change. And so my opening idea is a rather provocative statement meant to be a little bit direct. And it's this idea, again, hearkening from our presenters that just went, that brand tracking and ad tracking as we do it today is broken. And at the risk of offending my audience, I'm actually going to blame at least the organizations and perhaps everyone in this room, agencies and clients alike. I think we've done it to ourselves. And we've done so because it's so hard to change, and because we're kind of addicted to the drug that is brand tracking. On the agency side, let's be honest, these are big revenue line items. Tackling them, changing them has risks to top lines, hard to do. On the client side, they're big important systems, they're big budget items, and once you open the can of change, man, that can go all sorts of directions. And so we find ourselves oftentimes in a situation where we think, yeah, we're kind of holding our nose, we don't love it, let's tackle that next year. And time is a-wasting, and I think the time for change is now. And so my goal today is hopefully to inspire you to say, I don't think the ideas are out of this realm as to what we need to do. I think we need a little creativity, a bit of vision, and mostly courage and leadership to make the change. So to kind of take you through this, I'm going to tackle kind of 3 core ideas. The first one is how we got here. The second one is why we're stuck, which I think is really important because it's easy to talk about change. Let's get down to why is it that we're not changing? Because I think we sit in this room and we think these ideas, again, the ones that were just discussed in the last presentation too, they're kind of mom and apple pie. They're easy to get on board with, and yet we don't change. And then hopefully I can lay out a little bit of a vision of what we can do about it. So first, how we got here. Imagine it's 1960 and brand tracking as it's now formed is coming into play. It was an unbelievable, powerful thing. Branding and marketing are coming into their own. Metrics are being established so that when brands are being launched, you can understand, have people heard of it? What do they think of it? Have they tried it? What's our brand stand for? Modern marketing management was happening. What a powerful tool. And then we look 40 years later and say, what has changed? And I think we can draw an interesting analogy from something like Microsoft Office, right? How many of you were around as the computer revolution rolled through in the early 90s? I mean, I can remember getting my first Excel. What a dork I was. Man, you could add those columns. That was awesome. And now all of a sudden everybody's on Word and you can flip files around, and that was great. And what has happened over the last 20 years? How has that product really changed amidst all of the change and transformation? And I'd say the basic thing is they've added feature after feature after feature after feature. You want to do a print merge in Africa, you can do that. You want to do conditional formatting on the fly, but how much of it is really transformed, and yet the costs have doubled? The speed, even though processing power is 100 times faster, not necessarily any easier to use. In fact, many of us think it feels slower and cumbersome. And I think we in market research have the same analogy. How have we taken this thing and tried to make it better? Because we've added feature after feature after feature in the form of more questions, more analysis, more subgroup. We've made it bigger and bigger, and we find ourselves with something that is too slow, too unwieldy, and too expensive. And so why, if that's how we've arrived at this spot, why are we stuck? Why is it hard to make change? And I'm going to argue it's for three reasons, three very typical reasons as to why changes don't happen in all parts of the world. One, economics. Two, politics, relationships. And three, the shifting landscape and waiting for the moment to change, which the pause moment may never come. So first, the economics of brand and ad tracking. And somebody just asked this question, and so I think I'm going to try to, again, I'm opening the kimono a bit based upon industry data about where these dollars go. So I'm going to just use $1 million brand tracking study so that we can have a round number. You can think of these in terms of basically percentages. So a typical, relatively high incidence brand tracking study, about 20% of the cost is the actual data collection, the ability to get people to do the surveys, typically on the web. Another 15% is what I'll call the data management piece of getting it in, processing it, getting it basically ready. And then the remaining 65%, project management, analysis, and reporting. But if you peel back that amount that's going to project management, analysis, and reporting, what really is going on, about 70% of that labor is actually for what I'll call the report production. You got to get data out of one system, get it in the next system, move it to the next thing, get it in the PowerPoint, get it in the graph. Now let's do a pie chart, let's check the data. That's a tremendous movement of data around, and that's what our teams in the agency world spend a tremendous amount of time doing, and they're doing it very, very similarly in many, many cases to how it was done 30 years ago. And how much time is actually being spent on implications and storytelling, on producing brilliant visuals, on really significant analysis? I think oftentimes it might only be 10%. So you're spending $1 million and only 10% of it is really about adding that value. That's something that I think we need to attack. But when you talk about something this sizable, I think the economics of what they mean for clients and in the budgets is pretty meaningful. The second part that gets them stuck are the web of stakeholders. So back when I was in graduate school, I had thoughts of being a family therapist, and I studied systems theory and came to love this analogy of a dance. And the dance is, right, when you've got a system of interwoven people and parts, if one person changes the dance, I think I'd like to waltz. If the other people are cha-cha-chaing, man, that's ugly. And in fact, somebody's going to get their toes stepped on. And so there are great challenges when you think about going all the way from the CMO down to the marketing leaders, to the people that run the work, to the agency side, all the way out to the data collect. That whole system in some ways that Carlos and Horst were just talking about, that whole system is pretty nested. So it does not change easily. And that is another reason that we've struggled with change. And then lastly, I think what's going on in this digital transformation causes us to pause. And I'm not sure when the pause is going to stop unless we just decide to put a stake in the ground. Again, think about it. 10 years ago, 2005, a company called Google IPO'd, and there was a thing, a little project called the Facebook that started. That is 10 years ago. Now we're talking in 2018, they're estimating that digital marketing will actually exceed traditional television advertising in spend. That will be a 13-year window from literally cradle to grave of a total transformation. And so we're sitting here at this time trying to get our arms wrapped around it, and it gets pretty easy to say, you know, when that gets baked, then we'll go. And I'm not sure it's ever going to get to that spot. And so we've got to hook on and build something that's adaptable and adjustable. So what could we do about it? We need to find something, you know, the classic market research, faster, cheaper, better. We need all three. Oftentimes, right, the statement is you can get two of the three. But the way we typically get all three is through technology. And technology is out there to help us accomplish this. And so it is with great pleasure today that I announce Uber brand tracking. I'm like the biggest fan of Uber in the world. I talk to all the drivers. I just think it's the coolest thing in the world. But think about that. Like, what would Uber brand tracking look like, right? If we're upending an industry, if we're harnessing technology, what sorts of things would we want to do if we were building that new model? Well, one, we developed some high-end software to build a real-time data system, not individual pieces and parts, but something that really flowed. It would integrate traditional and mobile in a natural language processing. It would happen in real time. It would be sitting on our smartphones. The dialogue with the consumers would be happening on smartphones. Because of that, we could probably move a whole lot more data through the system at the same price. And ultimately, think back to my slide around where the labor is. If we're no longer moving data around, that's a huge amount of labor that doesn't have to go to that could go to other things, perhaps adding value. I kind of have an analogy for this that says it would be kind of a hybrid between traditional survey approach of brand and ad tracking, the very structured and representative, but frankly slow and unwieldy and all the things we've been talking about. Over on the other side is social media monitoring. Now, we were in meetings literally like 2 months ago with one of the clients that was up on the board two presentations ago, one of the largest CPG companies in the world. There's a new head of insights, and there was rumors afloat that he might literally be getting rid of brand and ad tracking and use social media. Now, personally, I think that would be very, very hard to do writ large, but why do you think that idea is coming from in a very senior person at one of the most influential clients in the world? It is about speed and cost, and I don't think we are quite grappling with the nature of those issues in the modern marketer's toolkit. In fact, we've had many conversations about this with clients, and I hate to say it, but many clients say, you know, I don't think we need the data any faster. And I think if CMOs heard that, they would freak out because they are under such tremendous pressure to adapt in this marketplace. So the idea here is something that sits in between. We've got to make it faster and lighter, but we've got to get that data, that voice of the consumer coming in real time. And then look what could happen with the economics under such a scenario. If we drain out a huge amount of that labor, we can actually get a huge cost reduction in a basic type of study like this. And again, I'm going to tell you about a case study. We have now done this, and I think it is very achievable. And then you can ponder, well, do I want to just reduce costs, or what if I triple the amount of time? This is back from our earlier graph. What if we triple the amount of time on the deep analysis and the consulting? You're still looking at something that is 30% less than current, running in real time because you're using technology to harness it. That is a powerful argument for value for your organization. So, what is all this? Something that I think you could go to your CMOs, your senior-most leaders, and give them the speed and decision support they want. You could present integrated data fit for the digital, social, and mobile world, and then still be offering more consulting and insight for the new consumer journey. And so this kind of change is not easy. It is easy to talk about change, but there are things, and we've gone through enough of these processes now. We actually have about 6 of these types of systems live now. And these are my list of why it is hard. And I think these are things that everyone in this room needs to grapple with. First of all, to begin thinking in terms of data systems, not research studies. Data systems are different animals with pluses and minuses, but obviously we're talking about the pluses. We must manage differently with more upfront thinking. At times we're a wing it industry, At times, we don't like to pin our clients down. They're used to not being pinned down, but I've done enough things to know that that can actually cause a lot of pain on the back end. So we're going to have to be stronger up front. Data systems, in some ways, seem less flexible in the short run to get the power in the long run. And again, this is not a game where there's no trade-offs to get these kind of advantages, but to get those sorts of powerful capabilities, you've got to build a system. The system's going to have to be a little bit more disciplined. The data systems infrastructure is a huge part of this, and we've actually had to go outside. So we've built a partnership with a company called Medallia. Who in this room has heard of Medallia, the software company? This is a company that has already taken huge share out of our industry. The customer satisfaction industry was the parlance of this room, and they are literally stealing share on a daily basis because these are Silicon Valley software people. They are literally down the street from Facebook on Page Mill Road. $80 million of venture capital funding. Their software operates in 39 languages simultaneously. They have 110 developers adjusting that software twice a day with upgrades. This is real professional software. And so we've gone and struck up a partnership with them. And I'm not under the belief that's the only place that a partnership could exist. But the idea is that, think about those dollars. And I would even speak to our biggest industry players, 80 million in venture funding, 110 developers. These are not things that the market research industry stomachs. But what are we about? In the LRW world, we're really not trying to be a software company. We're happy, in some ways, just like they suggested, to go out and find a best-of-breed partner who moves data and can manage data at a global scale and still have the kind of performance we want. I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of users on their software. That is all cloud-based. Everyone has direct access. It can be deployed to 5 people in Insights or 500 people in the organization. These capabilities are really new to us. And so we think that infrastructure is a big part of this. And then lastly, the damn part of these problems is you often have to invest in year one to get the benefits downstream. So just when you're under financial pressure from your clients, we say, oh, by the way, we actually need an extra $150,000 to implement this thing in the first year, but you're going to get a bunch of benefits downstream. Hard argument. So these are the 5 things that I believe if you think about the talk that came right before us, why don't we make those changes? I think these are really hard issues we all have to grapple with. So we call this offering in LRW, we call it BX. We stole it from the customer satisfaction experience, where they call it CX. This is really about understanding the real-time feedback of the brand experience your marketplace is having, both your customers as well as your competitors' customers. Data streaming in, accessible on phones and tablets, alerts, real-time text analytics, language processing, unbelievable capabilities. You can look at open ends 3 seconds after they happen. Drill down with somebody who just said they didn't like your ad campaign that launched on Friday. What is the reaction from the marketplace? We've implemented this at one of our most important clients, a client that spends $500 million a year plus on marketing. And it has transformed their dusty, tired, old brand tracker into a state-of-the-art tool. Our data is going to the board. There is now a Monday morning meeting, or Monday noon meeting every Monday, where they're reviewing the results over the weekend because they do so much advertising. They want to know about the most recent flight. This couldn't have even happened. I asked the client the other day, how much pressure was there on you from your CMO to produce a system like this? He said it was pretty significant. They were in my shorts. I said, what if you took it away from them now? He said, I'd be fired. Like, once clients taste what this kind of world, in my mind, Uber brand tracking kind of world looks like, you can't go back. So I just think, again, there are a lot of tools out there, a lot of ways that we can tackle this problem, but that we've got to fundamentally look ourselves in the mirror and understand why we're not changing. And unless we all want to be taxi cab drivers and dispatch people scratching our heads as to why some new upstart has flanked us and our dollars went away, we got to make this change ourselves, and we can do it. So thank you all for the time, and I'm happy. I don't know if we have time for any questions.
You can take one question. Right here. We have a mic. It's coming.
Hey, a wonderful presentation. My name's Eric Hogue from Miller Brown Analytics, and I work currently for a competitor, but have used LRW and have a profound respect for what you guys do.
Thank you.
A tension that I see is how do you balance the need for speed with a growing data ecosystem where you can get the data back and it just doesn't make sense and requires strategic thinking. So how do you balance the need for speed with strategic thinking?
Well, I don't know what to do with the notion of it doesn't make sense, because that typically shouldn't be a product of speed in this context. But the question of what do you do with strategy versus speed, and the answer is you can work at parallel paths. So the Monday morning meeting that is going on at our client that's driving, do we decrease our advertising because the campaign's not working? Do we dial it up? If we've got 2 commercials going, which one's working better? Those kinds of things, I'll call those tactics, and they're meant to be made fast, and you use the best data you've got. And because we've got a lot of data streaming in, with this, we were able to triple the sample size of that study because it's so much cheaper to move data under this structure. The bottom line is they're spending the exact same amount with us for 3 times as much data and way more consulting because of what happened after the startup costs. So then strategy is happening because of what we do monthly and quarterly. And that's why we think that it's a great fit for us, because we're using technology to handle the tactics, and we're focusing on what we think is our best core, which is the analytics and consulting. And because our team's not running around just trying to get the damn data because they got a request from the CMO that needs to be filled Tuesday, because, by the way, the client has access to this cloud-based solution. They pulled down the data in 37 seconds. That has just created all sorts of space for value to be added to it. That's my best answer, I guess.
Great. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.